Welcome back. We left Amos with an audience that was enthralled with how perceptive he was. I mean, they were just excited with this kind of preaching. What they didn't understand was that these 7 points were Amos's introduction, not the main body of his sermon, which comes right after an extended intro. The sermon really runs from chapter 3 through chapter 6, and he warns folks who say they can't wait for the day of the Lord to come. Amos quotes Indigo Montoya. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. Amos says, you think it'll be a happy day. Well, look at 5:18. It'll be a day of darkness, not light. Verse 20, even gloom with no brightness in it. In chapters 7 through 9, Amos reports out 5 visions the Lord gives him which explain in various ways how serious and devastating the discipline will be. So, all is hopeless? Be sure not to miss the 3 promises that close out the book. I'll destroy the sinful kingdom, chapter 9, verses 7 through 10. I will raise up David's fallen hut, verses 11, 12, and I will restore the promised covenant, verses 14 and 15. Let me do a sidebar on the grammar and syntax of 9:11. First, it should be clear, I think, that this declaration from Yahweh comes out of the 2 Samuel 7 promise. But there, God promised to build a house for David, and here he calls it just a hut. But Yahweh promises that as sorry as the house of David, the dynasty of David, is at the moment, there's coming a time in that day, the day of the Lord, when God will build it back up. And then God expands and explains 3 ways he'll accomplish this. I will wall up its breaches. The pronoun that our English translates at its is actually a feminine plural. So who are they? The plural her. I put it to you that the breach, the split, the broken apart hers relates to the house of David. It's the Malkut, kingdom, feminine. The northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, the kingdom is being breached, it's being torn apart. And on this, Amos agrees with Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, as we've seen. Remember Ezekiel's magic trick with the 2 sticks? One with Israel written on it, the other stick with Judah written on it, and he puts it together into his hand, and abracadabra, the 2 become one. And that's his object lesson, that God is going to unite the nation. Then secondly, I will raise up his, masculine singular, David's, and by extension the Messianic David's ruins. And then I will rebuild her, feminine singular, the sukkah, the hut, like it was in the days of old. See, Amos wants his audience to know that as vile as things are now, God will make things right. As bleak as it seems regarding the viability of the promised covenant, all is not hopeless. Not for the descendants of Abraham, nor for the nations, on whose behalf they would be the channel of blessing. So, look at the purpose clause in verse 12. That they may possess the remnant of Edom, and all the nations who are called by my name, declares the Lord who does this. It's coming. Verses 13 through 15. Think about that. Now, a couple of thoughts on Jonah. A prophet from Gath-Hepher, a town of Zebulun in Lower Galilee. He served during the reign of Jeroboam II, according to 2 Kings 14. Some argue that the book is anonymous. If so, then it's as anonymous as Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, because the claim of this text like those, is that this is the word of, and then we have Jonah's full driver's license or passport name, Yonah ben Amittai. Now, just like we've seen in other instances, any claim of a supernatural phenomenon renders a text ahistorical for some. And boy, Jonah presents 12 in 48 verses. So it's no wonder that skeptics are pressed to find another tack than historical. Many argue that the genre of Jonah then must be parable. Not that there's anything wrong with parable. Others argue that it's allegory. Not that there's anything wrong with allegory. It's just that, much as like with the Song of Songs or the last chapters of Ezekiel, there are just too many significant elements in which the narrative, there are just too many significant elements in the narrative for which there's no meaningful correspondence. Well, the style at least is biographical. I mean, as opposed to oracle, for example. The theme of the composition is God's grace and compassion toward pagan Gentile nations. They too are the objects of his grand reclamation reconciliation project. So, they're part of Israel's mission to declare his glory to the nations. But this is set against Jonah's and, by extension, Israel's intense fear and loathing of this superpower. It's this latter vein, I think, that connects Jonah with Obadiah and Edom's hatred for Israel. So, Jonah's flight west connects conceptually with the book of Hosea and Gomer's running away from her husband. Now, from an eschatological perspective, Jonah's virtual entombment in the great fish serves as a type of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. Look at Matthew 20, verse 40, where some of the Pharisees and teachers of law say to Jesus, "Teacher, we want to see a sign from you." What's Jesus' answer? "A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but none will be given except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. And the men of Nineveh will stand up in judgment with this generation and condemn it. For they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and now something greater than Jonah is here." Take a look at Luke 11 as well. The point that Jesus makes is that just as Jonah was assigned to the people of Nineveh, so the Son of Man is assigned to Jesus' generation. And given their response to the good news, the people of Nineveh will stand as witness on the day of judgment against the people of Jesus' generation. Well, next we'll take a look at the book of Micah. So, see you in a bit.